Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and my show is brought to you by my company, and we are the publishers of tools and books for growing strong leaders at work by building strong communication skills. And you can learn more at our website, growstrongleaders.com. Today, I'm really excited about the conversation I'm about to have with my guest, Tom Willis. And you'll find out why as we get into our conversation. Tom, welcome to my show.
Well, thanks for having me, Meredith. It's great to see you again.
Well, it's great to see you too, Tom. You know, since the very first moment we connected, we had all these areas in common. And I'm going to share a short bio with my audience, and they will see there are so many things about who you are that I identify with. Because for one thing, Tom believes that we are all born with unlimited potential. So do I. As a former classroom teacher, as I am, he also believes in the power of lifelong learning. And these beliefs have shaped his primary goal in life, which is helping others uncover their talents so they can reach their potential. Before joining his company, Phoenix Performance Partners, of which he's a partner, he has served in a number of different positions as CEO for Cornerstone Education Group, as a consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and as an engineer with the Intel Corporation. Tom is also the host of a really neat, I love the title, Tom, podcast called Culture Eats Everything, where he interviews CEOs and superintendents who've created positive change. In fact, that's the focus of his work with superintendents and CEOs to create cultures that really foster the growth of each person and the organization as a whole. So, Tom, you and I are just so in sync on this, and I can't wait to hear your perspective on these various areas and have you bring those to my audience, because they know that building a positive culture is something I'm really passionate about. Let's back up and start about your experience as an educator and what those years of teaching and then as a CEO and superintendent, how those influence the work you're doing today with your clients.
Yeah, well, to get there, we might have to back up a step before that. You know, I was working in Chicago for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and it was the .com era. And unfortunately, it was also the .com explosion, and a few thousand of us lost our jobs. So it was a really reckoning moment for me, frankly. And I ended up going to visit my best friend over in Africa and spent some time helping him there. And he was teaching at a school, one of, I think, three high schools for several million kids. So it shows how few kids got to go to high school. And I'll never forget, there was a moment where I was teaching, and the kids were, in the front row were like eager and had their hands raised. And one of the kids in the back was sort of half paying attention. And I just realized that, kids are kids. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. Doesn't matter how much wealth you have or lack thereof. And yet the contentment, the sense of just joy in them was palpable. And it was really a 180-degree turn in my life, where I came back to Detroit, Michigan, and started teaching after being an engineer and after being a consultant. And that was a whole new trajectory for my life. And I spent about 15 years with the school system in Detroit. In the last 5 years that I was there as the school superintendent or CEO. And just a phenomenal journey, just amazingly wonderful people that poured into me. I was able to get my MBA along the way from Notre Dame, and just a remarkable time in my life. And so as I look back on it, the thing I miss the most, frankly, is that daily interaction with the kids. Because, you can be having a bad day and it doesn't matter. They'll turn your day around just by their questions or by their smiles, and the joy that they bring to life.
Well, I love that because I remember my own teaching days, and you just never know what the kids are going to say. It's such an interesting thing, and they don't have the same hesitation to speak up, that we learn as adults that we have to do. Those experiences that you had there, especially in your role as CEO and superintendent, helped, I think, formulate some of your thoughts around what a good culture looks like. And so I'd love to hear, first of all, your definition. What does culture mean to you? What does it look like? What does it consist of?
Yeah, great question. There's a few different definitions that I like. Seth Godin says that the way the people around here do things this way, it's sort of the way we do things around here. We like to think of it as sort of the unwritten rules of engagement. And the part about that we think is helpful is that, people talk about culture. You can almost taste it. You can almost sense it when you walk into an organization. You can feel it almost right away, what kind of culture they have. And yet when you ask people what it is, you'll get 20 different definitions from 20 different people. And it's because of that unwritten part of it, that it's really unconscious, which is why billions of dollars are spent every year around the world trying to change and improve culture. And the vast majority of that work doesn't work because it misses that underlying component, which is that what makes culture so hard to change is that it's mostly unconscious. We show up and we are all sort of on unconscious autopilot. We do the things that we do, even personally, and we don't realize it. I'm an engineer. I like to think of myself as very logical. But as I've unpacked this more and as I began my leadership journey, I realized that I'm really not as logical as I like to think I am. That most of us are driven by other factors, a lot of those being emotional. And we'll make decisions in fractions of a second, which is great. It's a tremendous strength of ours as humans. But then we go and we find data to support the decision we already made. And then we call ourselves logical. And so I point to home purchasing as the primo example of this, because I think by and large, most of us are not terribly logical when it comes to the largest purchase that many of us make in our lives.
Oh, that's interesting. I totally get that, thinking about any home shopping I've ever done. So what do you do to help? Let's back up. A prospective client contacts you about working with them. What are some of the problems that they're having that cause them to say, we need help?
Yeah, great question. And there are a few themes. Every organization is different and unique, and that's part of our philosophy is we don't have a one size fits all approach. Every one of our programs is customized. It's built on 30 years of doing the work. And so we have a methodology, but every single client is unique. And so we customize it based on what they're looking to accomplish first and foremost. What are they going for in the next 5, 10, 20 years? And then we build our approach around what they want to accomplish, not just some process that, we have, which is what a lot of consultants do. It's sort of, you pay them to do X and then Y and then Z, and whether it's effective or not, you pay anyway. Our approach is very different. We put our butts on the line for helping clients achieve results, and we guarantee it. So much so that we tell clients, if you say we're not done, then we'll keep going for no additional fee until you get what you came for. So that's what it ensures, that every client's happy. It's why 95% of our work is referral based. And so as you think about what are the underlying themes, I guess if I had to make up a few or had to think of a few, one would be a new leader, a new CEO who's got a new vision for where they want to take the organization, and they know they can do it. But like me, it took me about 4 or 5 years to really build a solid team and to do what I wanted to do. But if I had outside help like us, I could have done it in 5 months probably. So it's a tremendous accelerant to the work. Or maybe it's someone who's been there for a while and they feel like they've just plateaued. They feel like they're a good team, maybe even a really, really good team or a great team, but they just feel like they've plateaued and they want to help breaking through that next level. So that's where we'll come in. Or it could be, a CEO who's just frustrated, who just feels like they've tried everything. They've tried every new whiz bang business book that's out there, and none of them seem to actually work. They're interesting. They're mentally stimulating for a few months, but then it doesn't work. It kind of fizzles out, and they're looking for a partner like us that can actually help them make sure that it's sustainable. Our ultimate vision is that you don't need us anymore. When we partner with CEOs, we say, look, our ultimate goal is that you don't need us anymore. We want to help you build this into your culture in such a way that we're no longer relevant.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about, as I'm thinking of listeners, what is a culture that's not functioning well? We've probably all worked in something like that, but I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about, what do you see as some of the most dysfunctional things? And then contrast that with where you'd help take them, which is to become a high-performing culture. Let's look at the distinction between those two extremes.
Yeah, great question. I think, Meredith, part of it starts with even that idea that it's dysfunctional. We take a very different approach in that a lot of folks will come in and say, like, to be a really effective leader, you need to do these 10 things, right? And if you don't, you're bad. Our approach is very different. Our approach is, look, you're human just like the rest of us. You're going to do things that are conscious and unconscious, some that help you and some that don't, some that shoot yourself in the foot. It doesn't make you bad. It just makes you human. And part of the job is to unearth those, is to uncover those, to help people become conscious of how are we shooting ourselves in our foot and not even realizing it because we're on that unconscious autopilot. Mm-hmm. So we never label an organization as dysfunctional. If it's so dysfunctional and so toxic and, just so challenging, we won't work with them, frankly, because we want to be successful. And the first step is they have to want it. If mm-hmm. they don't want a different future, then we can't possibly help them get there. So most organizations that we're working with are doing quite well, frankly, and they're looking to take it to another level.
Okay. Great.
Now, having said that, there are human behaviors that get in the way, that whether it's a high need for control, somebody that's got this high need to take control of things, and that ends up undermining their team, and their team doesn't feel empowered or trusted. That could be one, or somebody who's maybe have a high need for perfection. They really like things to be perfectly. That tends to be me, frankly, where we can get stuck making sure that something's perfect and kind of missing the overall picture. And mm-hmm. we get stuck in the weeds pretty easily. You could have a CEO that thinks that they're great and their team needs help. And oftentimes they don't realize that the culture that they're getting is because of their leadership. Mm. Now, again, it doesn't make them bad. It's just helping them to become conscious of how are they impacting their culture in ways that they don't even realize they're doing. Mm-hmm. So those are a few examples that I can think of.
Well, before you contrast that with a high performing one, I really appreciate that you don't label the organization or individuals, because it really isn't useful for helping them, I guess, get a new vision of themselves and their capabilities. So kudos to you for taking that approach. And I think what it does is it helps them become less judgmental of themselves and what the existing situation is, which would then create greater openness to your ideas. Is that accurate?
Exactly. Yep. It's we see ourselves not as outsiders. We see ourselves as partners, genuine partners. I mean, we build really deep relationships. We have people tell us things that they've never told anybody else in their life. And it's built on that foundation of trust. And Google has made psychological safety very popular. And it's for good reason, because it's important. It works. We human beings need that. We are not these sort of robots that are mm-hmm. without emotion. We are emotional beings. And if you want to be an effective leader, you've got to build a foundation of trust and of psychological safety in order to be effective. And so much of that foundational work gets skipped less and less, which is good as we evolve, I think. But the idea of a soft skill is starting to fade a little bit. But there are still folks who think of this stuff as soft, squishy stuff. But there is no harder skill than the emotional intelligence that it takes to be a leader, frankly, in our opinion.
I couldn't agree more. When I talk about the communication skills we've outlined in our book, Connect with Your Team, it's the same thing. These are not soft skills. These are hard skills. They do require a lot. So I want to spend some time in a few minutes about your process. But first, I want to jump ahead to the end, to the high performing cultures, to get a sense of what does it look like when you walk in? What does it feel like? What are the people doing? How are leaders interacting with folks? Just to paint a picture of that might be aspirational for some folks. Where might we want to get to? What does that look like?
Yeah. Great question. I think there's a few areas. One, people are on a mission, and you can feel it. You can feel the energy. You can feel the excitement that they are out to accomplish something bigger than themselves, some purpose that's greater than themselves individually or even collectively. They're going after something much bigger, which is very, very different than being able to recite the mission statement. Our belief is that mission statements aren't really worth very much, frankly. The best that they can do is remind you of the big mission that you're on. And the job of leadership is to get people tying their own sense of purpose, their own sense of mission to the organization's mission. It's what's in it for me. Well, this works in the positive end of the psychological spectrum as well. If really effective leaders help people uncover their own sense of purpose in life, and then once people get clear about that, then they can say, okay, now I see how my personal purpose, how I can accomplish my personal purpose in life fits within the organization, which is backwards from how most consultants and how most organizations do this. I was guilty of this too. When I was a CEO, we'd go offsite for a retreat once a summer, and we'd talk about the mission statement. We talk about the values. We talk about the vision statement. We'd kind of check it off the list. Okay, good. We're done with that exercise. We'll do it again next summer, right? As opposed to being on a mission is an every meeting type of thing that we're constantly talking about it. We're constantly presencing it in our minds, and people are fired up about it. So that's probably the biggest thing, is to, as we like to say, lead, help people get connected to a future that's bigger than themselves. They take on as their own future. Because if you don't, the best you're going to get is compliance. You're going to get people that sort of, can recite the mission statement because they have to, and they comply, but they're not really vested. They don't really have their heart into it. So that's the biggest piece of it. And that's usually the one that's most lacking, frankly, because a lot of us as leaders, we're in leadership positions, but we don't see ourselves as leaders. We look up and we see all the great leaders of the past, like Martin Luther King, and we say, well, that's not me. I can't do that. And so we have this self-imposed limitation. And so we go straight to what we're comfortable with, which is maybe something like management, and that's just why people are being, managed to death. And again, I was guilty of this being an engineer. It's where I was most comfortable, is processes and procedures and solving problems and measuring our results, which is very, very important. Don't get me wrong. It drives me crazy when I see a LinkedIn article that says management is dead. Management's not dead. It's just different. It's a very different skill than leadership. You need leadership. You need people inspired, and you need management. You need people to make promises to produce results. Because if you don't, then, you're stuck in the soft, squishy stuff. You're not making any progress. It may feel good. It may feel therapeutic, whatnot. But people may feel psychologically safe. But if you're not producing tangible results, then, you're missing the point. So you need leadership, you need management. And then the third piece I would point to is a coaching culture, a culture of constant learning and constant growth, where we're able to put our egos to the side and we're just able to help each other grow. None of us is perfect. None of us have this figured out. And we're just willing to be real with each other to say, hey, I'm really struggling with this topic, or I'm struggling with this person, or I'm struggling with this team. I could use some help. Could you give me a different perspective? And so that's one of the things that we'll notice the most when we go back a few years later, is we'll literally hear people say to each other, hey, can I give you some coaching? Are you open to some coaching? Now, the key there is that coaching is only coaching if it's asked for. And in a lot of organizations, it's not that way. It's sort of forced upon people, and that's not coaching. That's annoying. That's irritating. That's know-it-allism. That's lots of things, but it's not coaching. If people don't genuinely have the opportunity to say, no, I'm not open to coaching right now. I'm so fired up right now, or I'm upset, or I'm busy. Come back to me in a few days, or just no, then it's that's not a real coaching culture. So leadership, sense of inspiration, management, we're making promises to each other to get stuff done by certain dates and accomplish certain KPIs and OKRs. And then coaching, where we're able to support each other as we move forward into the future.
Mm-hmm. Oh, those are great. I resonate with all of them. So when you first go into an organization, I think you have some type of upfront assessment that you do, right? In other words, you're not making assumptions. You're not even going strictly by what the person is telling you, right? You're doing a little digging of your own. What does that look like?
Yeah, we have a few tools that we use that we've created over the years. One of them is similar to a DISC or a Myers-Briggs. If any of you have taken those, it's a 4-factor model. Ours is called the Elevate system. We built ours, though, a little different. Ours is not an assessment. We think it's a little bit dangerous, frankly, to even call these things assessments, because it's like we're assessing somebody. We're assessing their behaviors. We're assessing their unconscious behaviors, and then we're labeling people. And unfortunately, that tends to create a culture of status quo, of being fixed. If people say, well, I am this, whatever those 4 factors
goes
are.
back to labels again.
Exactly, which is not terribly healthy, especially for leaders. You don't get to be stuck. You don't get to be one way. Our model is built on, you have what we call default success strategies. You have things that have made you successful in life. So for me, I mentioned before, my high need for perfection has served me very well, especially as an engineer in solving problems and getting things done. Serves me really well 95% of the time. But there's 5% of the time where it does not serve me well at all. And I need to be conscious of that and realize, okay, Tom, let go of the perfection and move on, move on with your life, go focus on something else. And so our model is really built as a coaching tool for that reason, because we don't want to label people. We want to help people understand what drives them unconsciously. And then what's the future you're committed to? What do you want to grow towards? So that's one of them, the Elevate system. We have our own set of what we call conscious leadership surveys, which are similar to a 360, where people get feedback from their peers, but they also get to self-assess themselves, and they can see the compare and contrast there. And then we have a conscious culture survey, where it helps people become conscious of what's going on within the organization. And this one's a little bit different because it gets at the root cause. It really helps people understand, if we go to work on these 1 or 2 things, these 1 or 2 root causes, it'll address the 15 symptoms. Too often surveys are looked at and it's like immediately we jumped into the symptoms and we start fixing this little thing and this little thing and this little thing. And we've got a plan to address 14 different points. And then a year later, we did those 14 things and we wonder why we still have the same problem, because we fixed the leaves on the tree. We didn't go after the root. And so our survey is really designed to help people get at what's the 1 or 2 sort of root cause issues that will then have a tremendous impact on everything else.
Let's talk about a specific, without naming names, of course, but a specific client. What did you discover, were some of the 1 or 2 root issues for them? And then what did your intervention look like over that process of months or years or whatever period of time you spent? And then what was it like afterwards? How were they different than they were when you started?
Yeah, I'll sort of speak, and we have a high degree of confidentiality in our work, so I cannot be remotely specific. So let me talk in sort of generalities, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I'll kind of combine a few different stories. Sometimes you'll have organizations that are merging different organizations, so you're bringing together maybe 2 different cultures, and you've got this sort of little skeptical. I'm not sure about the other side. And sometimes it can be downright lack of trust. or it gets even worse than that. They don't care like we care. And it can get kind of ugly quickly. And so throughout our engagement, we'll help people to, again, get clear about what are they committed to? What is their purpose in life? What do they personally care about? And for some people, they've done this, a few times in their life, and it's just about going deeper and going deeper. And every time I do it myself, I get a new understanding of my own purpose. So it's not something you do once and you're done with. It's something you can do hundreds of times, frankly. And for some people, they may be at the end of their career and they've never done it before. And it's like this, oh my gosh, moment. I wish I had done this 30 years ago. If I only had done it this earlier, my whole life would be different. I would have spent my life differently. And a lot of times that has to do with working too much and not giving enough attention maybe to the home life or to their kids. And when you can do that, we like to say that the way to shared values is by sharing your values. It seems really simple, but it really is. It can be that simple. That when there's two people that are fighting and you give them a chance to just talk about what they care about in life and what their purpose is and what do they value, 99.9 times out of 100, they'll walk out saying, oh my gosh, I didn't realize we are on the same team. We are committed to the same things. And boom, just like that, the relationship can transform from adversarial to, colleagues who support each other because they see each other differently. So now how we do that, can take months, frankly, but that's kind of a high level example of maybe an approach we might take to help people shift from, we call our work transformational leadership, and it's transformation is kind of overused now. It's, my business partner likes to joke that if you put on new socks, that's a transformation, that everything's transformational these days. But in our world, it really is. People will walk out of our work saying, wow, this has not only made me a better leader, a better manager, a better coach, but it's also made me a better parent or son or, friend. And that's really when we get excited because it's made a difference in people's lives. And it's all about helping people to transform their thinking from their old paradigms to new ways of thinking.
I was just imagining as you were talking, when you mentioned earlier, control issues, perfectionist issues. Do you find it challenging at times? Because I think this is important also for listeners when they think about who they are and how they might tend to be. What have you found to be effective to helping people become more conscious of the way they are and it getting in the way, perhaps, of them being as effective as they might be?
Yeah. Well, the first step is when people say that's just the way I am, we jump up and down and we say, no, you're not. Right. Stop right there. You are just as much who you are in the future and who you're committed to becoming and growing into as you are your life experiences in your past. We've had CEOs who say, well, I'm just introverted, okay, that's how you've been in the past, but what are you committed to growing into in the future? And we've had CEOs completely transform how they act and behave. They start thinking out loud with people. They start sharing more of their thoughts. They start engaging with people. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's comfortable, but as a leader, your job is not to be comfortable. Your job is to get stuff done and to help people grow. Fundamentally, your number one job is to help other people grow. And that's not always comfortable. As coaches, we will say, we're not committed to your comfort. We're committed to your growth. So that's the first thing is challenging even that notion that's just the way I am. And then helping people to shift into, how do they want to grow and improve? How do they want to be in a year from now, maybe? How would they like to show up in the world? This is true for all of us. It's for me, every 6 months, I have a new insight about, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was stuck in that area. And now once I'm conscious of it, I can go to work on it. So to answer your question, maybe more directly, a couple thoughts. One is our Elevate system is it's a very in-depth 40-page personalized workbook that every single person gets. And because it's personalized, it produces tremendous insights just by reading it. But then we also put people in cohorts to coach each other. Not theoretical. We don't do any rubber chicken throwing or trust falls or any of that garbage. Not that that's not fun. I've done that before, but it tends not to produce any results. We put people in real conversations about real topics, and that's what produces insight. That's what produces results. And people usually walk out saying, wow, I didn't realize, I thought I was hiding that, all those years, but I wasn't. People knew it, but now we're all aware of it, and people still are supporting me. They still love me, and they're still willing to help me grow. And it's true for everybody, all the way up to the CEO. So we can all help each other grow and improve, and move beyond that way of thinking, that's quote unquote, just the way I am.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, with our focus on grow strong leaders, I love everything you're saying about growing and the personal growth. And I think just thinking of my own journey as a lifelong learner, and this idea of who are you committed to being and becoming, that's not a notion we grow up with.
No,
that is something that a lot of folks really don't even know is a choice, because they think, well, this is who I am. This is my personality. I can't really change my personality. And so I just love this approach that you take with them. It's so freeing, it seems like. Have you seen some
Absolutely.
dramatic changes with people once they realize
Absolutely.
I have so many more options than I ever thought I did?
Yeah, and fortunately, the industry is doing that to people. It's reinforcing that, because again, we're labeling people with some of these quote unquote assessments that are very well known, that get tons of press, and they can be used for good. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of times they do more damage than they are helpful because of that, because they label people and people get fixed. There's a great book. Many of you may have already read it, but I'd highly encourage it, by Dr. Carol Dweck, called Mindset. Mm-hmm. And she fundamentally boils down that you either have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. Now, it's not that simple. And there's certain areas of my life where I'm fixed, and there's certain areas where I'm very growth oriented. It's not just either or. It's in different areas we can be different things, and it's certainly on different days. Some days I don't want to get better. I just want to get through the day. I am fixed on those days. And that's okay. It's not about labeling myself or making myself feel bad that I'm not growing. It's just being conscious of it and saying, okay, that's interesting. Today I'm not terribly interested in growing. So that book's a great way of framing it, a great way of thinking about this, and a great way of noticing in what areas of my life do I feel like I'm stuck, and what areas do I need to go to work on growing and improving.
Well, one more question I'd like to ask. When you go into an organization, I'm assuming you typically start at the top and work with the leadership and, kind of have a ripple effect or trickle down effect. Do you ever start at a lower level and try to work up to influence an organization? I won't say bottom up, but, lower levels further down?
The short answer is no, Meredith. We almost exclusively, I'd say 99% of the time, we engage through the CEO or the school superintendent or the executive director, if it's a nonprofit, whatever the top person is, that's where we start. Because if they don't hire us and they're not 100% committed to this process, because it's pretty intense. I'm not going to lie. It's a growth experience. And lots of people walk into it very skeptical for good reasons, because they've done a leadership development program before that didn't work. Mm-hmm. People are rightly skeptical, and we invite that skepticism because it's part of what we can use to create the breakthroughs and to create the insights and to create the growth and the transformation. So we know that if we don't start at the top, it's not likely to be as successful over the long term. Now, having said that, there are occasions. And we always start with the executive and their executive team, by the way. So we always do this work in teams because that's just 10 times more effective than one-on-one work. Not that there's anything wrong with one-on-one coaching. It's just not as effective in our view.
When you're trying to transform a whole culture, I can certainly see that to be the case.
Yeah.
Working with one person isn't going to have that same kind of impact.
Yeah. The slight exception to that, I would say, is if the CEO wants to check us out, he's not sure what he's getting into or she's getting into. They'll ask us to coach them for maybe 3 or 4 months first, and then we'll engage with their team. And that's fine too. That usually tends to work. Now, if there's somebody who we know personally or is connected to us that really needs some help and they're not at the top level, then we're happy to do that. But usually we do that stuff kind of pro bono just to be helpful. And sometimes that will lead to the bigger work that we do, but oftentimes it doesn't, because it's like going to a training or a conference. You go to it, you're excited, you learn all sorts of new things, and then you come back to your organization and you learn to the buzzsaw, where as I don't care how strong you feel about it, it's hard to bring that stuff to life if you don't have other people with the same perspective as you do, if you don't have the same energy and excitement. And so it ends up getting sort of squelched by the culture. Again, not necessarily intentionally, it's just what happens.
Sure. Tom, I love the work you're doing. It's so important. I just am imagining the organizations where you have done this effectively, which I imagine is every case you work on, because as you pointed out up front, if you detect there's toxicity there's a lack of openness, there's this culture where they don't share your values about people and growth and possibilities, it's not a good fit for you to begin with. So your chances of achieving great success go up when you're not trying to rescue organizations.
Yes,
I have that right?
Yes, if we're inserted into an organization, we don't do it because it tends not to work. We're not turnaround consultants who are there to hack off departments and save money and do that sort of work. There's some value to that work, don't get me wrong, but it's just not what we do.
I appreciate that. Well, please share with my audience how they can connect with you and learn more about the services, and if there's anything in particular you'd like them to be aware of.
Yeah, thank you, Meredith. Appreciate that. We really do two things. We've got this group that we do with CEOs across the country. That's probably 90% of what we do. And then the second is we started a cohort. Actually, it's been so successful, we've had to start another one, of CEOs and school superintendents from across the country. Actually, we might have someone joining us from South Africa shortly. So it's becoming international, but it's on Zoom. We meet once a month, and it's really a place for folks to come together across industries, across state lines. They're not competing, and we can have real, genuine conversations, because it's a tough job. Being a CEO is tough. There's a saying that it's lonely at the top. And especially during a pandemic, it's really lonely. It's people are like, I'm not sure what to do. I don't have all the answers. And so having a place where people can come and learn from each other and grow and to get coaching from each other is really what we set out to do when we started it last year. And so that's called the Interchange. So if there's CEOs out there who are school superintendents who are interested in being considered for that, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. We'd be happy to talk to you about that. You can go to our website, which is phoenixperform.com, Phoenix like the city, or perform.com. Or you can just reach out to me directly, and my email is just tom@phoenixperform.com.
Great. And are you on social media also for people to connect with you?
Yeah, we spend most of our energy in LinkedIn world. So that's probably the best place to find me, under Thomas Willis, based in Michigan here. And another great way to connect. But no, I don't do a whole lot of other social media. It tends not to be effective in our world.
I can appreciate that. Well, Tom, I just admire the work that you're doing. I love the impact you're having that's got the trickle-down effect on kids too. If you're working with superintendents, of course, that works all the way down the organization. But also, as you mentioned, when you help people really grow themselves, it impacts every aspect of their lives, not just the workplace, but at home also. So yes, thank you for your commitment to your own growth, which I admire, and also the growth of everyone in the organizations you work with. Thanks for being with me today.
Yeah, thank you, Meredith. It's exactly that's exactly it too, by the way, is when we can help people, then they help people. It's sort of this trickle down effect where we can impact thousands of lives, especially in schools. That's especially exciting for us because we know we had one superintendent who when we started to work with him, sorry, a quick story. He said, I don't know what I got us into, team, but if it's no good, we'll just get up and leave. And they said, all right, Tom and Brad, take it over. And he turned to look at us and we said, oh, great, thanks. They ended up becoming a great client over the years, and the impact for that culture and for those thousands of kids that they served still just warms my heart, because ultimately at the end of the day, we see this work as really a ministry. It's a way to impact people around the country. And so we just feel so blessed to be able to do it. So thanks again for having me on today, Meredith. I really appreciate it. And I'll let you know when our book comes out next year.
Great. Yes, I'll be glad to help promote that too. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out our 2 books, Connect with Your Team and Peer Coaching Made Simple. While you're there, download the free facilitator guide to find out how to implement our unique peer coaching system. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.